Scripting, recording, and editing on the fly. What could possibly go wrong? Hello again. It's been 2.5 months since I did a video, so I guess first of all I should thank everyone for their patience, especially thank you to my Patreon backers for your patience as I've taken some time off for paternity leave. But I am back to full-time development now, full steam ahead on Gunmetal Arcadia 0. And since I ended last year, or I guess I'll consider it the last season of Let's Make Gunmetal Arcadia, since I ended the last season with sort of a recap of the entire development process to that point, I figured I would start this season with a little bit of a recap of what I've been doing during this interim period. I haven't been working full-time, I just haven't had the time to do that. But, I have been trying to get stuff done as I've been able to, and I've made some cool progress that I wasn't necessarily expecting to. So I'm going to take a look at that in a minute. But, yeah, it's the start of a new year. I am working as hard as I can to get Gunmetal Arcadia 0 done by hopefully early summer. I don't have an exact release date yet, but, I have a schedule that is believable at this point. There's not much of the game there yet. Like, I couldn't really send out a playable test build at this point, but I'm hoping that by the end of the month, by PAX South, I can have at least a vertical slice that's like a single level taken to production quality. So that's exciting. Yeah, I guess I'll talk a little bit about what I've done in the interim. I started doing some concept art on paper that I had never really taken the time to do before, and that's been really good. It's given me sort of a better idea of the tone of Gunmetal Arcadia and just sort of all the possibilities of what this world might encompass. Way back in the day, I'd done some doodles of what the main characters might look like, so I had some sort of concept of what they would look like at least. But yeah, this was really the first time that I'd ever sat down and just tried to flesh out, like, what is the rest of this game going to look like? Everything from characters, enemies, environments, upgrades and power-ups, and just random decorations and props and all that sort of thing. So that's been really fun to sort of just get a better sense of what this thing is going to be. So I actually have something like concrete and tangible now, something on paper as opposed to just the entire game existing in my head. So that's nice. I started working on a couple of new tile sets. I think the sort of nature one is the one that's gotten the most love so far. This is going to be sort of the middle of the game of Gunmetal Arcadia 0. This is after you've left the city and you're crossing the wilderness on your way to find these invading monsters that are the Unmade Empire. So you're crossing through this wild territory that's populated by wild elves who, some of them may not be friendly, some of them may attack you, but there will also just be, creatures out in the wilderness who aren't necessarily friend or foe. Yeah, so I've been working on this tile set a little bit, doing some like rocks and trees, and there's a really good thread that I've linked a few times on, I think linked on my blog and on my Twitter a few times, from the NestDev forums, where someone was breaking down like different forest settings in NES games. So I was examining all of those and trying to come up with something that could, maybe riff on some of those ideas, but still look like it's a consistent, coherent part of whatever the Gunmetal Arcadia aesthetic is. And that was pretty fun. It still needs a little bit more work, but I'm happy with how that's turned out so far. I've been writing some new music. I'll put some links down in the text or in the comments somewhere. I put new ideas for songs up on SoundCloud all the time. I don't necessarily always link those anywhere from Twitter or from my blog or anything, but you can. I think you can subscribe to me on SoundCloud. I don't know how SoundCloud works. I just put music up there. Yeah, so I put some new music up on SoundCloud, and I'm pretty excited about where it's going. I've been writing more new tunes that take advantage of some of the instruments that I've added to my synthesizer recently, and yeah, it's coming out really well. I think I'm finding the sound of Gunmetal Arcadia. I knew from the start I didn't want this game to sound like Super Win the Game. And some of the earliest music that I was writing did sound like that, just because that was what I was in the habit of writing. So I've kind of made a conscious effort to just like try composing music in ways that aren't familiar to me. And I'm really happy with how this is turning out. So yeah, I'll run through some examples of that here real quick. I've been making some new improvements to my CRT simulation, of course, because I always do. Adding some new options to the monitor reflection on the sides of the screen, so that blurs out a little bit now, and you have control over how much it blurs in each dimension and stuff like that. I've added more options for tuning the bloom, the post-process, and I can't remember if I've talked about this one in the past, but there's some sort of filmic camera effects that only show up actually at the very start of the game during the intro sequence and the title screen, although there's like some console commands you can enter to keep them on all the time if you want to. But there's some effects like film grain and chromatic aberration and stuff like that, and of course those are all completely tunable as well. I don't know if I'm going to have time to get around to making like presets for the CRT simulation for Gunmetal Arcadia 0, but definitely before the roguelike game ships, I want to get some sort of implementation of presets in there so you can sort of get a better idea of what the complete breadth of options are without having to go in and tune every little thing separately. So it's been in the back of my mind, and as I've been refactoring my configuration system recently, I've been looking for opportunities to sort of set up hooks so that later, when I do have a chance to work on that sort of thing, it's a little bit easier at that point. I guess finally I did well, I'll show this in just a second because I want to do a little bit of just a playthrough of the game, but I've been working on a new like intro / screen for minor key games. This started, I guess, with Super Win the Game. Before that on Eldritch and You Have to Win the Game, we just did sort of a basic, the logo appears and fades out. And on Super Win, I was like, I want to do something a little bit flashier. So I did the like spinning green grid thing that was a little bit of a callback to like the Super NES Rare intro for games like Donkey Kong Country. And that was fun. And then David ran with that for the intro to Neon Struct, where there's like the neon sign for minor key games. So for this one, I wanted to go completely 80s and do a ridiculous like laser grid intro, but then also have the red, green, blue elements of the Shadow Mask and the CRT simulation appear somewhere in there. So that's one of those little things I've been working on over the last couple of weeks. I'm going to just do a little bit of a playthrough here and show sort of what state the game is in right now. So yeah, switch over to my PC. I have the game set up and running here. Hopefully Bandicam will work correctly. Let's see. So yeah, this is that new intro. Just a quick intro, but nice shiny laser grid. Here we have the intro to the game. As I was mentioning earlier, there are these sorts of filmic effects. So you can see, I'm not sure how well it will show up, with compression and being uploaded to YouTube and everything. But there is there's film grain on here. The camera does sort of like a little bit of random wandering. Basically, I want to make it look like it's being filmed either through a handheld camera or like on a cell phone camera or something like that. And yeah, it only does those effects right here in the intro and then here on the title screen. But those are customizable as well, at least in the current build. I'm not sure I'm going to leave those enabled for the shipping game just because you don't see them throughout most of the gameplay. But anyway, let's see. So right now I have some developer options enabled, and that's why you see this debug option here. If I do that, I can select a campaign, which just basically lets me sort of segment up levels into sort of discrete chunks. This Xanadu test was where I originally began developing content for Gunmetal Arcadia, and then Xanadu Gaiden is content specifically for Gunmetal Arcadia 0. So let's see, if I select this one, I have a number of maps in here. I've named all my maps after herbs and spices because I want something that didn't necessarily imply any sort of ordering. I didn't want to call them like level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I didn't want to call them like level A, B, C, D. So I picked names at random and ended up with herbs and spices. So like rosemary is I think my default level right now, but basically I'm trying to gray box the levels in such a way that I can go back and like reorder them later if I want to, and just sort of apply a theme to the structure of the level at some later time once I've sort of ironed out all the gameplay. So that's my debug menu. When you start the game for real, that option won't be there, and you'll just hit play, and that loads the 3-slot file selector. And so this is one of my most recent things I've been working on here. You got Vario moving up and down to select a file. If you don't have any data there, it says no data. Once you select one, it plays a little animation, fades out, and starts the game. This is what you'll see also every time you die and restart. It'll do that little intro where it tells you where you are. And then here you've got, this is what my gray box levels look like right now. This is not far from being finished. There's no enemies or items or anything in here, but it's an example of just like sort of blocking out space and thinking about what it's going to be like to, move through this environment and yeah, just get a feel for that. Right now I still, I'm starting with like the debug values of like, you start with 20 of everything, which you would not start the game with 20 keys. I imagine keys are going to be fairly rare and fairly valuable, but yeah. This is one of the levels that I've spent a little bit of time working on, just doing a blackout here. Some of the others, I've really only gone as far as like blocking out empty rooms, but just a path of empty rooms, and sort of trying to think about what the structure of each level as a whole is going to be in terms of like, okay, you spend this long within some environment, and then it changes to a different environment, and then you fight a mid boss or a mini boss. And then you checkpoint there, probably. I haven't yet figured out exactly how checkpoints will work, but probably you'll checkpoint there and then continue through a second leg of the stage. And you'll go through maybe 2 different environments there and then get to the final boss of the game. So I've been sort of going through the high level blackout and just figuring out what the what the structure of every level is. I've been thinking of it sort of in terms of like a song structure, like, you know, a verse, chorus, bridge. So you go through like the verse and chorus, which is these two different environments that you'll kind of go back and forth between, and then you reach, you know, the boss fight, which is kind of the bridge, the thing that breaks up the I don't want to say monotony because that's a bad word, but breaks up the pattern a little bit. And yeah, just trying to think about, I don't know, I guess most game designers would talk about it in terms of like the, you know, the graph of excitement. So, you know, you want those peaks and valleys. You know, you want the excitement to sort of culminate with a boss fight, but then needs to, you know, cool down a little bit, and you have, you know, a couple of areas where you can rest and, you know, refill your health and all that sort of thing. So, of course, there will be like shopkeepers and stuff, and I'm still figuring out all that stuff, figuring out what the economy of this game will look like. But yeah, that's you know, I guess I can keep walking through this level if you want to see more of it. But it's basically it's all these sort of just, you know, gray boxes and stuff. Eventually, I'll go back through and populate this with enemies, and probably what I'm going to do is have, even within like the enemies, have sort of gray boxed enemy designs where I know the sort of functionality that I want the enemy to have, but I don't know, like, is it going to be, you know, one of the unmade empire creatures that's like viciously evil and wants to kill you, or is it like just a wilderness creature that, you know, maybe is defensive but not evil? You know, is it a wild elf who is just, you know, sort of a faction all to itself? What are these things? And this would be, for instance, like where you would fight a mid-boss, and then you'd go on to the next room, and there would be a brief pause for like shopkeepers and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's sort of the structure of the game. Really quick here, I did want to I guess show off one other thing. If I go back to my test map that I've been using since way back at the start of the game, I've got some sort of glitchy animations over here I was using to test something, I don't remember. So yeah, this is a good place to test it. Let's see, if I go into the CRT simulation here, let's see, I have some new options for bloom. Let's see, if I turn this up way up here so you can sort of see what this is doing. There's two separate passes of blurring, so you can sort of see individually each of these is doing different things. And then you can also choose the resolution of the downsampled buffer that the blur uses. And you can see this sort of creates some artifacts at certain places. And probably at some point I need to do like a more in-depth dive into exactly what this is doing. But essentially it takes the entire game scene, downsamples it to a small buffer with automatic bitmap generation. And that does a little bit of, not really blurring, but softening of the scene. And then when you when you do multiple samples of that, then you get this really nice soft bloom. So yeah, I have added controls for that, and then added more controls for the reflection. So if I turn the reflection up really bright here so you can see it clearly, let's see, I'll turn these up all the way to start with. So there's a blur value here that you can see, and this just does, you know, a few texture samples. If I turn it up too high, you can start to see the discrete samples showing up in there. But then what I can also do is taper the amount of reflection near the inside of the frame. So you can see there, you know, basically it's not as blurry immediately adjacent to the edge of the frame, and then it blurs more further away from there. And then, so I can do that, and then I can also blur only in the direction opposite the reflection normal. So that's sort of a very subtle effect, and very subtly different from the previous one I showed, but you know, in conjunction you can get some pretty nice effects there that sort of minimize the artifacts of having these individual texture samples. So yeah, I'm really happy with how that looks, and it the reflections were always one of those things that were a little bit subtle. You know, I've had people stand there watching the game for minutes and then go like suddenly notice like, oh wow, there's a reflection there. So it is one of those sort of subtle things, but I think having that little bit of blur just really helps sell the effect even better than it already was. So I'm excited about how that looks, and hopefully eventually I will get those presets in there, and yeah, that'll be cool because then I can, very, very quickly show off like the breadth of possible effects that you get out of this thing. I guess this video has already gone on way, way longer than I expected. I thought this was just going to be a short recap of like, hey, I'm still alive. I'm still doing blogs and videos on a weekly basis, but it's fun to show off the game, and hopefully, now that I'm back to full-time development, hopefully it will be, I'll have more stuff to show off week after week. So thank you for watching. Thank you for your patience as I've been sort of out of commission the last 2.5 months. I look forward to continuing to work on this game, and I look forward to hearing your comments, and see you next week.